June 2001, Utah's Canyonlands shimmered like a furnace. Heat rolled off the mesas in silver waves, and every horizon looked like a mirage pretending to be a road. Somewhere along Highway 95, a faded red Honda Civic pushed south toward the Height Crossing Bridge. Inside were Emily Carter, 22, a geology major who kept maps laminated in plastic; Noah Lewis, 23, a construction apprentice with an easy laugh and a habit of overpacking snacks; and Benji Morales, 21, film student, dreamer, and self-appointed documentarian of everything. They'd promised their families the plan. Their itinerary read like something written by optimism itself. Friday a.m., drive to Moab. Friday p.m., fuel at Height Marina, camp near shore. Saturday, film sunrise for Benji's student project. Sunday, return to Salt Lake City. At 2:17 p.m. on June 8th, they appeared on security footage at a Moab gas station. Noah pumped fuel. Emily folded a paper map across the windshield. Benji danced with his camera on record. The clerk remembered them later. They looked like the start of a road trip commercial. By 5:42 p.m., they crossed the Ranger Gate at Height Marina, signing the visitor ledger. Ranger Cal Porter still had the page years later. 3 kids, 2 tents, 1 Civic, destination Cove camping, polite as church mice. They asked about night swimming. Porter warned them, "Stay near the rocks. The lake drops fast." Emily wrote in her journal that evening, "Water so calm it looks solid." Sunday night came and went with no calls home. Monday morning, when Emily didn't text her roommate, it raised an eyebrow, not an alarm. By Tuesday evening, Noah's foreman phoned his parents. By Wednesday afternoon, both families were in the ranger office holding photos. At 3:10 p.m., Porter radioed from the overlook above the reservoir. Found tire tracks heading down to old service ramp. End abruptly at waterline. The Civic's pattern, Goodyear Regatta 2s, matched Emily's purchase receipt. But there was no sign of braking, no scattered gear, no oil slick. The lake was at record height. The drop-off beneath the ramp was nearly 90 feet. Divers went in the next morning. Visibility under 2 feet, silt thick as milk. They followed the ramp edge until their guide ropes vanished into darkness. No contact, no debris. The Civic might as well have driven straight into another world. For 8 days, boats dragged sonar across coves while helicopters scanned the surface for shimmer or gas bubbles. The equipment pinged shapes that dissolved on second pass. Driftwood, boulders, the ghosts of things that weren't cars. By June 17th, the park declared vehicle unlocated, presumed submerged. Funding ended. Cope didn't. Families returned every summer when the heat broke the horizon into mirage and memory. They hung ribbons on the guardrail, left notes under stones. Time did what it does in the desert. It waited. The reservoir rose and fell. Storms came, erased footprints, rewrote shorelines. Emily's mother kept her daughter's room exactly as it was. Journals lined by color, hiking boots by the bed, an unopened roll of film still in its box. Noah's father sold the family truck to pay for private divers in 2003. They found nothing. Benji's camera bag washed ashore in 2004. Empty except for a single undeveloped roll. Summer 2024 broke every record since the 1950s. Ranger John Mendez, now in his 60s, stood in the operations trailer reading the old report. He still remembered the families from 2001. "We searched this lake until it hated us," he said. Then, softer, "Let's finish it right this time." At dawn on August 13th, a 5-person recovery crew launched a barge. The water was calm, the air sharp with dust. Sonar swept a clean line and returned an image shaped exactly like the memory everyone had tried to forget. A small sedan, front end buried in sediment, tail angled upward toward the sun. Mendez leaned over the monitor. "That's her." They lowered divers. At 8:42 a.m., one surfaced, mask streaked with mud. Confirmed. Red Honda. Plate mostly gone, but VIN tag visible. 3 passengers inside. A stillness fell over the deck. 23 years of waiting condensed into one heartbeat. Mendez crossed himself. Bring them home. It took hours. Straps slid under the frame, silt clung like cement, and every pull felt like asking permission from the dead. When the Civic finally broke the surface, the crowd on shore, rangers, reporters, 3 families, stood silent. The car's paint, once bright, was now the color of blood washed by time. Inside, faint shapes through glass. 3 friends, still together. The tow crew set the car on tarps beside the water. Cameras stayed back. Emily's mother stepped forward until Mendez put a hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle them with care," he said. She nodded. "You already have." That night, floodlights glowed across the cove like a second sunrise. The lake that had swallowed them reflected it calmly, as if relieved to be done keeping secrets. Forensic teams began cataloging everything: shoes, camera, IDs, fragments of a tent still folded in the trunk. When they unrolled the sleeping bag, a dry, sealed envelope slid free. By sunrise, the air above the cove smelled like rust and rain. The recovery barge floated motionless, while technicians in white suits moved around the red Civic as if afraid to wake it. The car looked oddly intact for something that had slept underwater for 23 years. Silt filled every hollow like dust in an old room. When they pried open the passenger door, a pocket of air escaped with a sigh loud enough to make everyone stop. Inside were 3 seats, still upright. In the back, a cooler, half crushed by pressure. In the front, 2 skeletons side by side, seatbelts still fastened. The driver's side was empty. The third body was in the rear, half turned toward the window, as if reaching for something outside. Forensics began photographs. Nobody spoke. Ranger Mendez watched from a few yards away. He had seen wrecks before. Cars folded around trees, boats sunk in floodwater, but nothing that felt so calm. There was no violence here, no chaos, just the stillness of people who had run out of options and sat quietly, waiting for air that never came. A forensic diver named Casey Thornton handled the camera that had been found wedged under the dashboard. A Canon SureShot, plastic casing split, but film chamber sealed tight. "If it's intact," she said, "we'll get there last minutes." She placed it gently in a dry container. The rest of the gear, 2 sleeping bags, a flashlight, an unopened bag of chips, was logged and bagged. By noon, the bodies were lifted one by one. The medical examiner confirmed preliminary IDs by jewelry and dental records within hours. Emily Carter, driver's seat. Noah Lewis, passenger. Benji Morales, rear. All 3 likely drowned within minutes of submersion. The pattern of seatbelts suggested they hadn't even tried to escape. The windows were up, doors locked. Perhaps the car rolled faster than they expected. Perhaps they thought they could stop it before it slipped. At 3:40 p.m., the evidence truck departed for Salt Lake City. The lake settled back into its silence. 3 days later, the photo lab in Denver called. "You're going to want to see this in person," the technician said. Ranger Mendez flew out the next morning. In a small darkroom, lit only by red bulbs, 6 photographs hung from clips. The first 3 were road shots: dust trail, dashboard, Benji's shoes on the seat. The 4th showed the slope above the marina, tire ruts vanishing into bright water. The 5th was darker, a long blur of sky and windshield. And the 6th stopped Mendez cold. 3 faces, lit by a flash, reflected in the windshield. Emily gripping the steering wheel, Noah leaning forward, Benji pointing the camera at the mirror. Behind them, water shimmered inches from the glass. The timestamp read 1911, June 8th. 2001. The very minute the sun had gone down. They hadn't realized yet how fast the slope dropped, or maybe they were laughing, filming the last joke of summer. Mendez stared at the print until the edges curled under his fingers. They were alive, he murmured, and then they were part of the lake. The official report came a week later. The ramp had eroded beneath surface level after heavy rains. It looked like a flat beach, but ended in a sheer drop. The Civic's light weight and narrow tires had given no warning. The angle, combined with wet silt, was enough to pull it forward once the brakes failed. Engine torque, neutral gear. Slow slide, sudden plunge. Nothing cinematic, just physics. Emily's mother met Mendez at the visitor center when the report was delivered. She read it once, folded it in half, and said, "So it wasn't fate, it was slope." He nodded. "It was slope." She smiled sadly. "That's almost worse. Fate at least has meaning." Later that evening, the Park Service lowered the water level again for inspection. As the barge crew drifted back toward shore, they spotted something glinting near the ramp, an old highway marker half buried in clay. When they rinsed it off, the paint showed faint letters, "No parking beyond this point." Someone had removed it years before the accident and tossed it into the lake. The sign was mounted beside the new memorial the following week. The plaque below it read, "Recovered August 2024, returned to warn the living." When the story broke nationally, headlines called it the Canyonlands miracle, though no one involved used that word. For the families, it was closure, nothing more and nothing less. Emily's mother donated her daughter's journals to the University of Utah's geology department. Noah's father rebuilt the old truck and drove it to the overlook once a year. Benji's younger sister used part of the settlement money to finish her brother's short film project from 2001. Piecing together his footage with the recovered photos, she titled it Desert Light Forever. The final scene played at a small theater in Moab, a shot of three friends laughing against a horizon that seemed endless, followed by the words, "For those who never made it back, but stayed together anyway." Ranger Mendez sat in the back row. When the screen went dark, nobody clapped. People just sat there in the blue glow, listening to the faint hum of the projector, as if afraid to break the quiet that had finally settled over the story. Outside, the night air was warm and dry. From the ridge above the highway, the lake reflected the moon, calm and silver, hiding nothing anymore. The desert had kept it secret for 23 years. Now it had given it back. Autumn 2024. The desert looked different now. The waterline had retreated half a mile farther since the recovery, leaving behind ribs of cracked clay and the ghost outlines of old boat docks. To anyone else, it was just another drought year. To the people standing on the new overlook, it was sacred ground. The Park Service called the event a dedication. The families called it coming home. There were folding chairs in a semicircle, a table draped with the Utah state flag, and a single microphone that squeaked every time the wind shifted. At the edge of the platform, a bronze plaque gleamed under the sun. In memory of Emily Carter, Noah Lewis, and Benji Morales. June 8, 2001. Found, August 2024. The desert kept them until the world was ready to remember. A ranger read the inscription aloud, then stepped back. Emily's mother, Ruth Carter, rose first. She was older, thinner, her gray hair braided down her back. But her voice still carried the warmth that used to call 3 kids in from the yard. "My daughter believed rocks could tell stories," she said, looking out over the layered cliffs. "I guess she was right. It just took the mountain 23 years to speak." Beside her, Noah's father clenched a worn baseball cap in both hands. "We used to think we'd find the car someday," he said quietly. "Turns out the lake was keeping them safe. I can live with that." Benji's younger sister, Elena, read from a notebook, lines taken from her brother's last screenplay draft. A camera doesn't save time, it just gives it back later. She looked up, eyes bright. I think that's what he did for all of us. Ranger Mendez stood behind them, hat pressed against his chest. He'd spent half his career searching for ghosts in national parks. But this case had stayed under his skin like fine sand. When the speeches ended, he walked to the plaque and placed a folded map beside it. Emily's old route, laminated and sun-faded, found in the Civic's glove box. Every story deserves a map, he said. After the ceremony, the families followed a narrow trail down to the newly exposed shore. The air was sharp with salt and silt. At the spot where the car had been raised, 3 small markers waited, smooth river stones engraved with initials. EC, NL, BM. Ruth Carter knelt, poured a little bottled water over them, and whispered, "You were thirsty too long." The sound of trickling water seemed to echo. Even the wind held still for a moment. Later that afternoon, as visitors dispersed, Mendez remained. He watched sunlight crawl across the dry ramp, illuminating the faint tire tracks still visible in the clay. They ended exactly where the lake began again, a perfect line between what was found and what stayed missing. He thought of how many other families were still waiting for lines like that. When he finally turned to leave, a teenage boy who had been helping fold chairs stopped him. "Sir," he said, "is it scary, finding people like that after so long?" Mendez considered. "No," he said. "What's scary is realizing how easy it is to forget they were real." 2 weeks later, the recovered Civic was delivered to the Museum of the Desert West in Moab. Curators debated how much to clean it. In the end, they decided to leave the water stains, the cracked paint, even the thin film of red dust that had settled since its retrieval. A small plaque beneath read, "The Canyonlands car, discovered August 2024, after 23 years under Lake Powell. Preserved as found, a record of time, silence, and friendship." Visitors stood quietly in front of it, some with hands pressed to the glass. On busy weekends, a ranger would tell the story, how drought revealed what technology and divers never could. He'd always end the same way. It wasn't luck, it was patience. The desert doesn't lose things, it just keeps them until we're ready. In a display case nearby, the restored photos hung in sequence. The last image, 3 faces glowing in flashlight reflection, sat at the center. Beneath it, a single caption, "The moment before the water moved." People lingered there longest. Teachers brought students. Filmmakers brought cameras. Hikers came down from the canyons, dusty and sunburned, just to stand in front of that photograph. They said it looked like hope. In November, the university premiered Elena Morales' short documentary, Desert Light Forever. It opened with Benji's surviving footage, shaky handheld shots of the drive through Monument Valley, Emily laughing at a map that wouldn't fold, Noah singing off-key to the radio. Then came the recovered underwater stills, fading into modern drone footage of the drained cove. Elena's narration was steady, almost gentle. The desert teaches you that distance isn't disappearance. It's just a longer kind of waiting. When the lights came up, no one clapped right away. Ruth Carter hugged Elena in the aisle and said he'd be proud. That winter, storms returned to the plateau. Rain filled the gullies, and by February 2025, the lake had risen enough to reclaim part of the old ramp. The memorial deck now sat a few yards from the new shoreline, close enough for waves to lap against its posts. Rangers worried the plaque might corrode, but Mendez said to leave it. Let the lake touch them again, he insisted. It's part of the story. On March 3rd, the first anniversary of the recovery, the 3 families met again at dawn. The sky was pale rose, the air cold enough to see breath. They brewed coffee on a camping stove, poured 3 cups, and set them on the rail. The steam rose straight up, disappearing into the morning light. Ruth Carter looked out at the still water. "This is how I imagine them," she said, sitting together, waiting for sunrise, thinking they had all the time in the world. Nobody answered. They didn't need to. That summer, hikers began leaving offerings: smooth stones with initials, bracelets, ticket stubs, even a student ID laminated in plastic. By autumn, there were hundreds, forming a ring around the platform. Someone started calling it the Circle of Light. It wasn't official, but rangers let it grow. A year later, travel blogs picked up the story. The Canyonlands Miracle, they called it again, pairing drone shots of the memorial with emotional music. The views climbed into the millions. Mendez didn't watch them. He preferred the quiet visits, the ones where people arrived before dawn, stayed until heat shimmered over the valley, and left without saying a word. In December 2025, he finally retired. His last day on duty, he drove alone to the overlook, took off his hat, and placed it on the rail beside the 3 stones. "For the kids," he said, "and for everyone we never found." Then he walked back to his truck and didn't look over his shoulder. By the next spring, water had swallowed the lower half of the ramp again. From the air, the new shoreline looked smooth and featureless, as if the desert had drawn a curtain over the story. But locals knew where to look. At dawn, when the light hit just right, a faint red gleam appeared beneath the surface, a reflection from the memorial plate under 3 feet of water. Pilots passing overhead reported seeing it flash for a second, like a signal. Cameras couldn't capture it. Maybe it was just mirage, or maybe it was the desert doing what it always does, keeping the illusion of life alive a little longer. Every September, on the anniversary of their last photograph, Ruth Carter still writes a note and tucks it under a stone at the overlook. She never signs it. She doesn't need to. Each one ends the same way. If you can still see the light, you're not lost. The stones pile higher every year, wind whispering across them like film unraveling in a projector. When storms come, the waves scatter them, but hikers always rebuild the cairn within days. At night, under the wide Utah sky, the lake glows faintly blue where the ramp disappears. Satellites pick up the reflection once a week, a single pixel brighter than the rest of the basin. Technicians mark it as surface anomaly. Ruth calls it a heartbeat. Some stories end with a revelation, others with silence. This one ends with both. The 3 friends who vanished in 2001 no longer exist in missing person databases. Their cases closed, their evidence boxed and archived. Yet every time the drought lowers the lake, the earth reminds those who passed through. They were here, they laughed, they trusted the road, and the desert remembered them. Because the desert always remembers.